Hello and welcome to Maitland, Florida. I am Matthew Courtney alongside the one, the only Brady Smith. We are here ready for the first local of the 2024 Video Game Championship season. It's Florida Midseason Showdown time. Brady, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. What's kind of cool about this particular event is that we reached 68 people, which is more than we've gotten for many years. I've been playing this game since like 2014. We have not reached that number for like a mid-season showdown. So that's a first. Very exciting.
That is incredibly exciting. The excitement around VGC and Pokemon in general has been felt since the release of Scarlet and Violet. We've had record-breaking regional turnouts, record-breaking local turnouts, and everybody is just on the bandwagon ready to play this game.
Yeah, absolutely. What I really like about this particular event is that obviously we just got a new official rule set confirmed. Like we had our speculations, it would be like the new DLC Pokemon, and it is that. So that's exciting.
Yes, the Regulation E format officially unveiled today. The Kitakami Pokedex. Now, we're going to see a number of new Pokemon that haven't been in Scarlet and Violet. We're going to see a lot of returning Pokemon from past generations, a lot of fan favorites, but some newcomers as well, especially Ogerpon.
Yes, which we actually got a little glimpse at the current usage stats. So Ogerpon for this tournament is at a 50% usage, so it's on half the teams. That's kind of exciting because there's 4 different versions of Ogerpon, so it's like, well, yes, using Ogerpon. There's 4 different ways to run it, obviously. So it'll be kind of exciting to see which specific variant starts to rise up above the others.
Oh, absolutely. We've got a grass type, a water type, or grass and water, grass and rock, and grass and fire, each one having their own unique specialty, each one giving a player an opportunity to utilize it in a different way. Now, there are a few interesting things about Ogerpon, especially 3 out of 4 of its forms, in that you can't hold an item.
Yes, that's kind of interesting. So it's like that's like generally like the trade-off for like very specific like good Pokemon. Like we saw it with like Ultra Necrozma or like Mega Pokemon back in like 2015, 2018. Usually they are limited to their item slot by holding a specific item. So inside this case, by holding the mask, you can change your type, which also changes one of your moves into being a different type. So if it was a grass type before, it becomes a fire type, depending on the type you have. But what's kind of interesting about that here is basically like I feel like that kind of adds like a lot of like depth. Like you could say like Ogerpon like default like Grasping Plagues has a Defiant. You can also like Life Orb, Focus Sash. But by having like the mask, like you also just you can't be knocked off, which is kind of cool because knockoff is now into the meta. So I feel like Ogerpon is number 1 with good reasoning. However, it's something we talked about a little bit before this was also a Fluttermane. That used to be like the number 1 usage for like a while. So do you think it's like new toy syndrome that people are playing Ogerpon right now, or do you think it's actually better than Fluttermane?
Well, in my experience, Fluttermane tends to be one of those Pokemon that when it's on your team, it's a pivotal Pokemon. You don't want to throw it away. Now, Ogerpon, I feel like because you have the various forms, or when you have Ogerpon on the field initially, it has one ability. When you Terra it, it changes. And that's going to play into a number of different ways in which players are able to utilize the Pokemon. However, I am just getting word that our round 1 stream match is about to begin, so let's hop right into it. We've got Kyle Ayala and Michael Garcia, a couple of players who have been around for a little while and know this game inside and out, and they're ready to put on a show for us today.
So I know both these players. Cool thing about Michael, he's actually not really a he doesn't really play this game that much. But what Michael does do is he's his brother is Brasiliano Garcia. or Garcia, who has been playing the game for a while, 2014. He top 8 at Florida Regionals back inside of 2015. Very good player. So this is Prisciliano's brother. So that's a little bit about Michael right there. The other person is Kyle. Kyle has gotten top 8 at Georgia 2016, if I remember that correctly. He has top 32 San Diego this previous year, and he had a pretty good season last year. I remember that. He got like a just continuous CP, just championship points throughout the whole year. I know that Kyle's also going to be going to Latin America, so it looks like he's trying to have a solid team or a solid showing for the season. These teams are Kyle is holding a hyper offensive team with the Rillaboom, Urshifu, Water, Tornadus, Hisuian Arcanine, Ogre Pawn, the Wellspring variant, and Chin Pao. And Michael has a much more, it looks kind of like a balanced team. You also have the Chin Pao for like offense. It's Amoonguss, Iron Hands, Chi-Yu, Fluttermane, Urshifu, and Chin Pao.
So Michael's also running the Urshifu Rapid Strike water variants. We saw in Pittsburgh and have seen lately the usage stats for Urshifu are still high. However, the Dark variant has been seeing some gameplay as of recently, and he's a personal favorite of mine, so I'm excited to see that. However, both players rocking the Urshifu Rapid Strike. On Kyle's side, we've got Assault Vested Rillaboom, Covert Cloak Tornadus, Wellspring Mask, Ogre Pawn, of course Ogre Pawn as we were discussing. The 3 variants that aren't just straight up grass type have to be holding a specific mask. So the Wellspring Mask goes with Wellspring Ogre Pawn. Urshifu Rapid Strike with a Choice Scarf, Choice Band, Hisuian Arcanine, and Focus Sash Qian Pao. We've got 2 choice items on this team. And now, Brady, for somebody who has a lot of experience, how does holding a choice item, which locks you into one move, help or hinder you, especially in this open team sheet format?
Right. So number one, it helps because you get a lot of opportunity for bursting stuff down if you're holding like the choice specs or like the choice band, or like the choice scarf. You can outspeed something that you normally wouldn't outspeed. Let's just say on Michael's team, he has a choice scarf or Shifu. Now, normally Urshifu obviously can outspeed Fluttermane because it's a much higher base stat, total inside or base stats at speed, whereas Urshifu with the scarf can't speed it. So there's good parts of it where it's like you can burst stuff down with like choice specs, Chi-Yu. You can destroy Trick Room before they can get it up. You don't even have to taunt them, or you can outspeed stuff you're not supposed to outspeed. Now, on the other hand, it's not the best because now that your opponent knows you can't protect, they can abuse that information. So.
All right, and we are on the field here. Kyle leading off with Tornadus and Hisuian Arcanine. Michael rocking Iron Hands and Fluttermane. A very common lead that we've seen so far since Regulation B when those 2 Pokemon have been legal.
So something I do think is kind of interesting, and I was going to point this out earlier, basically Iron Hands from Michael's team is very, very solid into Kyle's team because you can knock out the Urshifu, the Tornadus, you can do super effective damage into the Chin Pao and also the Hisuian Arcanine. So I think that Kyle's strategy for knocking out this Iron Hands will be overwhelming it, which given he has Tornadus and Arcanine, there does not seem to be a comfortable way to overwhelm it unless you maybe opt to go for a Terra Fairy and then you go for a Terra Blast onto the Iron Hands.
That is interesting to note. Kyle, without a Fluttermane, doesn't have that Pokemon that sits in front of Iron Hands that can put a lot of pressure onto it, and unless we see this option here, going with the Terra Fairy on the Arcanine, removing the super effective damage that Iron Hands can do, and preparing to deal super effective damage itself.
So what you just said there, that's what I really like about this play by going for Terra Fairy on the Arcanine, is that basically, number one, you reduce the damage output from the Iron Hands going for a Drain Punch onto you. Number two, you can hit it with super effective damage. So we see Michael go for the Fake Out into the Covert Cloak Tornadus, so probably a mechanic which he's not quite aware of, and we'll hopefully see that inside Game 2 adjustment. So Iron Hands literally goes for a Fake Out, and it gets nothing off, and basically Iron Hands now fodder for the rest of the game.
A critical hit onto the Arcanine, but that, I think if you're Kyle, you're feeling okay about that first turn. You were able to get your Tailwind off, your team's going to be faster for at least the next 3 turns, and you've got a lot of pressure on the field.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting because typically like, how Tailwind wants to operate is that you just kind of lead with something and you're okay with letting it go down if you can get your Tailwind turns up. So we do actually see that Bleakwind Storm did not pick up the Iron Hand, so that'll be kind of clutch here. Knowing it's not like a Hurricane or anything, there's no secondary chance of confusion. So it did connect on the Iron Hands, but not knock it out. So ideally, Iron Hands will be able to get a knockout here in Revenge for it knocking out its buddy Fluttermane there. Tornadus goes down, but like I said, on Tailwind teams, you kind of want your Tailwind setter to go down because now Kyle has multiple turns of Tailwind to quickly burst through Michael's team. Michael has two Pokemon, meaning there's no defensive switches coming out. So
And
the tempo is definitely in Kyle's favor.
although the Bleak Wind Storm did not take out the Iron Hands, the recoil damage from Wild Charge does take it out. And now, Kyle, as you said, going to bring out Ogerpon, the great friend. What a nice market.
Yeah, I saw this Ogerpon actually follow me. So that third move that people are going at Ogerpon, I've seen some Taunt, I've seen some Swords Dance set up. I think follow me is very cool, especially if you can't fit on like an Amoonguss on your team. Just because redirection is very nice to have on a lot of these teams. So like I said earlier, it seems like the tempo is out of Kyle's favor because he does have access to a water type move to hit this Chi-Yu. And I believe that Michael has not gone for a Terra yet. Is that correct?
That is correct. He still has his Terra option, and Arcanine, locked into that Terra Fairy Terra Blast, doesn't want to be subjected to a Rage Powder from Amoonguss there and do virtually no damage. So going to swap out in favor of the Qian Pao.
So this play accomplished two things. So I really like this. Number one, we know this is a Terra Fire Chi-Yu. So it's very, very safe to go for your water type move into the Chi-Yu, knowing that even if it does Terastallize, you're going to be hitting it with super effective water type damage. And maybe Kyle did not know the limits of his maybe he didn't know the limits of his Ogerpon, so he decided to switch in the Chin Pao just to get the Sword of Ruin to lower the defense of the Chi-Yu and then one hit knock it out with this water move. So that was very brilliantly played, and we're going to see Kyle win this game.
Yes, a valiant pollen puff from Amoonguss into the Ogerpon. However, I have to believe that this Icicle Crash, provided it connects, and it does. Ooh, the
So
Amoonguss
that's
hangs
good
on.
That's good information. For the next game, Michael now knows that his Amoonguss does not faint to one Icicle Crash. The other thing which I would be taking note of right now if I was Michael is that the Chin Pao does have Icicle Crash and not Ice Spinner. So Michael has the Rocky Helmet on Amoonguss, which if you don't know, Rocky Helmet reduces the damage, or it makes you take recoil damage if you hit it with a contact move. So typically Chin Pao want to go with this move called Ice Spinner, which makes contact with the opponent because it's 100% accurate. But Kyle going for the riskier version, which is Icicle Crash, because it does more damage and it also has the benefit of ignoring the contact. So if you saw right there, Chin Pao got to keep its Focus Sash intact. So if I was Michael, I would be aware that you do not have a way to allow this Focus Sash on Chin Pao to go down by clicking Rage Powder.
Now, Brady, that game felt like Kyle was in control from turn one, with the fake out into the Covert Cloak Tornadus not preventing the Tailwind and allowing the Arcanine to, one, get an Intimidate off into one of Kyle's main physical attackers in the Iron Hands, and then B, taking super effective damage from a Choice Band Terra Fairy Terra Blast. What are you looking at on Michael's team in terms of adjustments that he could make?
So if I was Michael here, I would basically be trying to do something with your Shifu. We saw the Intimidate from the Arcanine was very annoying inside the previous game. Not to mention that Michael does not have his own Intimidate to kind of slow stuff down. So what I was thinking, a potential opportunity what you could do into this if I was Michael, I would maybe go with like Urshifu plus Iron Hands or maybe Urshifu Amoonguss. You kind of want to slow down the game inside of the early stages and just kind of get knockouts with Urshifu and try to create an end game of probably Chi-Yu inside of a board where it does not faint. Actually, no, I would bring Chin Pao if I was Michael. I would play Chin Pao in the back, have Urshifu as a lead, and then kind of go with the game plan like that. So it'll be interesting to see if Michael adapts and brings the Urshifu as a lead.
Well, and also, if you're Kyle, in these best of 3 formats, you came out, you had a commanding lead right from the start. Your lead felt oppressive to Michael's. Now, do you read into him possibly changing his team? Do you stick with what you did the first game? How do you analyze what you're going to bring after such a dominant first game win?
So that's a good question. And it obviously depends on the case by case. The first question I would ask if I was in Kyle's position is, can I get away with doing the same thing 2 times in a row? Just because my opponent expects it does not make it any worse, depending on whatever it is you're doing. If you're trying to cheese, it makes it worse. If you're going for just safe plays, you can lead the same thing. Instead of Kyle's position in particular, it was a very, very safe play from his perspective to go ahead and go for the Tornadus plus the Arcanine, knowing that Michael does not have Intimidate and there's no way to kind of slow down what you're trying to do. So we do see the exact same thing.
All right, and we do see the Tornadus and Hisuian Arcanine, but we do see a swap on Michael's side, opting for the Fluttermane and Chien Pao.
This is interesting. Okay, so the game does continue. So we see the Chien Pao lead instead of the Urshifu, like I was saying. This is where I think Urshifu could have been very cool, because you could technically go for something along the lines of a Terra Water, expecting a Terra Blast going into you from the Arcanine. You could just hit it with a Surging Strikes, because you will no longer be weak to the Terra Blast if that was the case. So no Urshifu here is definitely an interesting choice, because essentially it's like you're not able to slow down this Arcanine. As we see, just lock in Rock Slide, and that's kind of unpunished, because with a Tailwind you're going to outspeed both. You break the Sash on the Chien Pao. There is a solid shot you get at least one flinch here. So really, Kyle just kind of putting the guns like turn one and just kind of flexing.
And it's a very difficult situation for Michael, because he has no way to stop the Tailwind. And interestingly enough, goes for a Sucker Punch into the Tornadus. Sucker Punch fails unless the opponent's going for an attacking move. And oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That Choice Band Hisuian Arcanine connects with both Rock Slides, brings Chien Pao down to its Sash, and wipes Fluttermane off the grid.
So that's the double-edged sword of ruin with Chien Pao. Is basically it's like if you don't have a physical attacker you're combining with, you're literally opening a vector for your ally to take a lot of extra damage. So we saw right there that Rock Slide, even though it was choice banded, would normally not knock out a Fluttermane, but it did. So literally Kyle just kind of robs this turn one, gets a knockout, gets your item on Chien Pao, brings it on 1 HP, gets Tailwind set up. So if I was Kyle, I'd be like, I'd be feeling
pretty
great.
good.
Yeah.
Feeling pretty good after that first turn. We see the Iron Hands come in on Michael's side. Now, Tailwind is already up and gives an interesting no fake out coming out from the Iron Hands, goes straight for the Sucker Punch. Bleakwind connects on both Mons again, now 80% accurate. Kyle's getting pretty lucky already here with these Rock Slides and Bleakwinds.
Let's see if there's a flinch as well.
No flinch.
No flinch. So that's very interesting that Michael decided to not go for a Drain Punch into the Arcanine, or maybe try to snipe a switch out. So what, in my eyes, a free play Michael technically had was knowing that the Arcanine is choice banded locked into the Rock Slide. It has no way of doing a lot of damage to your Iron Hands, and your Tornadus is also doing a lot of damage to Iron Hands because they go Assault Vest. So in my eyes, this was technically a very, very safe Drain Punch onto the Arcanine. Now, of course, you risk the chance that maybe they Terrastalize. However, it's like knowing it's locked into Rock Slide, it's doing nothing to Iron Hands. So I felt like you could have abused that position and protected your Chien Pao, but because no Protect was chosen from Chien Pao, you're now down to your last 2 Pokemon against Kyle's 4, so it's not ideal.
Now we've got everybody's favorite duo on Michael's side, Iron Hands and Amoonguss. We've got a big defensive wall that can also deal a lot of damage in Iron Hands, and a way for it to heal up its friend. Amoonguss going to get taunted here by the Tornadus. And after talking about how lucky Kyle had been, well, okay, you trade the miss for the critical hit on the Amoonguss. Iron Hand's going to heal up and a crit onto the Arcanine. I'm not sure if that mattered, given Iron Hand's massive attack stat and super effective damage. But this Iron Hands is going to be almost all the way up to full, and now it surely is.
That was a good play from Michael, because Michael has open team sheets, so he was able to see that Kyle does have taunt. And taunt was a very, very safe play there because 100% accurate. You don't want to go to sleep because that's the only way you could lose the game is if Amoongus gets off a spore here. So going for taunt was very safe. Now, Michael did get the most of what he could have gotten out of that turn by going for a side pawn puff. So this could have been interesting, though, is if we saw a Drain Punch come out the previous turn. Like I was saying, then basically like Amoongus could have protected, and then you'd have had more HP on Amoongus like towards this end game. This is actually not over by any means. Surprisingly, because like I said, Iron Hands is kind of the threat. Now there's no Intimidate to kind of slow it down. Iron Hands could totally rob this game.
Well, we're going to see a Rain Dance come out here from the Tornadus, boosting up this Ivy Cudgel from Ogre Pawn into the Amoongus. It's not enough to knock it out. Heavy Slam from Iron Hands just to finish off the Tornadus. Doesn't want to take any more recoil damage. But we've got a boosted Ivy Cudgel coming in, and a Pollen Puff from Amoongus does, decent damage, and Tailwind runs out. Not that it's going to really matter with the other two on the side of the field.
This is where Iron Hands can win this game. So it is kind of interesting because Kyle has not opted to go for the Terra yet. So a Terra Ghost at the right time can definitely ruin this Iron Hands day. There's really two plays that could happen here. Number one, Kyle could opt to go for a Protect on his Amoongus and knock out the Ogre Pawn, expecting a double. Or actually, no, there's no Protect because it's currently taunted. So if I was Kyle, I would just knock out that Amoongus because if you get rid of the Amoongus, you can win the game pretty straightforward. So I'd be looking for like 100% way, probably like an IV onto Amoongus. Then I would maybe Terra, Ghost, and Icicle Crash, and as long as you don't miss any of your Icicle Crash, you win. So there's no Terra, though.
Icicle Crash going into the Iron Hands does a good chunk of damage. The Ivy Cudgel going into the Amoongus does take it out, but no Terra on Kyle's side. Let's see if we see the Drain... and a flinch! Oh, well, outside of not being 100% accurate, Icicle Crash also gives you, I believe it's a 10% chance to flinch if it connects.
Yeah, it's a 30% chance to flinch. And that is, honestly, given the board state, it didn't matter. This was over a few turns ago. Getting that taunt on the Amoongus was very clutch for wrapping up that end game. If I was Michael, this is why I would have liked to have seen an Urshifu here, is because it could potentially break, maybe not necessarily this Ogre Pawn because it does have Water Absorb, but it could have broken the early game to allow the Iron Hands to sweep through the late game. Iron Hands just not have enough tools to kind of close this out. Like we said at the very start, Kyle's game plan here was just overwhelming the Iron Hands with just damage, and it looks like he was able to do that pretty successfully in this game.
Ivy Cudgel, paired with the Sword of Ruin from Chin Pao, is going to take out Michael's Iron Hands, and a pretty clean 2-0 win for Kyle. He's going to start this mid-season showdown 1-0. Michael dropping to 0-1. However, still a lot of rounds left to play. So, thoughts, Brady, on that first match? It seemed like Kyle had a plan, stuck to it, and it worked.
Yeah, so basically Kyle's whole game plan was just it's a pretty standard Tailwind team, a standard lineup where you just want to go for Tailwind the early game, let Tornadus go down, then go into one of your sweepers, being the Ogre Pawn / Chin Pao, just kind of overwhelm them. And I thought that he executed that very well. Like I was saying, I would have liked to have seen an Urshifu Rapid Strike coming from Michael there. However, he did not go for that, and then we saw that that did not work out because the Hisuian Arcanine was able to pick up a one-hit knockout onto the Fluttermane turn 1, and it also went down to the Sash on Chin Pao, and then Chin Pao also went for Sucker Punch on the wrong slot on that turn, so that turn 1 ended up snowballing the game. That turn 1 / lead definitely defined the game, so if anything, I want this to be a lesson as to just how important it is to make sure you lock in with the right Pokemon, make sure you think about your turn 1, because people have gotten really good at this game. It's it's pretty much decided at turn 1 now, so you need to make sure that you get the turn 1 right, you don't leave yourself too open to anything in the lead. Outside of that, I thought that was a really good game. I enjoyed watching that. I like the quicker games because it's just very fast paced. There's a lot of action inside there and a lot of thinking that goes on inside of it.
Well, it absolutely, I think Kyle went in and made his moves correctly. Now, watching the stream, you see we've got a chessboard here. Pokemon and chess aren't too dissimilar. You've got the pieces on the board. You have to figure out how to analyze the board and play to your outs.
Yes.
One of the outs that that Kyle played to in that game was the Icicle Crash into... Oh, all right. I apologize. We are heading now to break. We'll be right back with round 2. We look forward to seeing you here for our next round of games.
Toodaloo.